Hi guys, the Soulful Goddess. I'm looking forward to today. This is so exciting. My name is Shay Sparks. I am a certified fearless living coach, speaker, author, and podcast host. Gosh, and I just want to first of all thank you to Leah. I think we just connected maybe a week or maybe even less than a week, maybe a few days ago. And just to be able to connect with her has been awesome. So we're going to go over a lot of information, and I will stop in the middle so we can ask questions. If you have questions, if you have comments, feedback, I would love to hear any of that. And today's topic is we're going to talk about how to talk with difficult people. So first of all, please write in the comments, what makes someone difficult? Is it that they are, I don't know, maybe they don't come across as having customer service if you're out somewhere purchasing something, or maybe that it's an in-law, or maybe it's a loved one, or maybe it's your own child. We know that you have darling children, and I'm not saying that they're difficult. I'm just saying, what if they are? We could also have spouses that are difficult. We could have step-parents and grandparents and bosses and co-workers. There's so many things that kind of define a difficult person. So I just want you to imagine for a moment that there really isn't a difficult person as in it's a wrong thing. It's a bad thing. What if it's just that's who they are? Maybe they've had a bad day. Maybe they've had a bad life. How many times have you run into somebody and you think, gosh, that person's kind of gruff, or that person's kind of nasty, as in they have a bad attitude or they're negative or something like that. And then you get to know them and you find out that they've just been through so much in their life. For an example, I'm also a hairstylist, and I didn't mention that before, but I am also a hairstylist. So as you know, as most of us get our hair done, we sit in our hairstylist chair and we tell them everything. And so at some point, it's the first time that you're sitting with your hairstylist. And I had this happen to me multiple times. They would sit down and they would, for a first-time client, they would be in a bad mood. And they would tell me that their last stylist did this, this, and this. And it was a horrible experience. So they've never had a great experience in the salon. And I'm like, okay, tell me about it. So they tell me about it. Then they go into, just being really, how do I want to say? They go into being a negative person, their energy. The energy that they put off just goes into a negative mode. And everything that they talk about is a complaint. So it's not that their experience is about where we're at in the present. Not about them treating themselves and getting their hair done and enjoying the process of self-care. Instead, they are in the process of beating themselves up. They're in the process of complaining. They're in the process of whatever they are really going on in their head. They're not in the present moment. So that sometimes is what difficult people mean. And what I have found is that when you keep diving a little deeper, it's so much more than just that moment. Meaning, she's had a bad life. She is going through a divorce. She just found out that maybe her husband was cheating on her. There are so many things that we don't even know, we don't even realize that's going on. And we take that for granted sometimes when we're interacting with people, especially in a customer service or a service kind of way. So we talked about a service kind of way, so let's talk about family. So I don't know about you all, but I had a difficult mother. Now, when I say difficult mother, she was a non-nurturing person. She did not know how to love freely and openly. Now, what's really interesting is over our lifetime, the more I healed and the more I talked with her and the more I learned, she started to open up. However, what she opened up about was her own childhood. She was raised by a mother who was bipolar, and she would have manic episodes. So what does that mean? And why am I telling you this? I'm just going to pause right there. I'm telling you this because we never know what's going on in that person's life, why they are a difficult person. We never really know how our parents were actually raised because we weren't there. We never know, and maybe it's that spouse that, or the boyfriend or girlfriend or loved one, a significant other, whoever it is that we're dealing with might be the difficult people that we think are the difficult people. And sometimes it's really about diving in deeper to figuring out what's really going on. You can talk about how you have an experience with someone and, oh, that's just who she is. Yeah, it is. It could be that's just who she is. Like my mom, when she was telling me about her mom, she was telling me how having a bipolar mother, she had ups and downs, and she did not know how to give love either. She didn't know how to take care of herself, nor did she know how to take care of children. So my mom learned how to be a mom by following her footsteps. Even though my mom was not bipolar, was never diagnosed with bipolar, was never even near that kind of manic up and down. She was not that. She was the cold part. She was the, well, if I don't share my feelings, if I don't love openly, I won't get hurt. And that's what is so interesting, is how we close ourselves off thinking that we're protecting ourselves. And we're protecting ourselves in some way, shape, or form. And we're also shutting out all the good that can come. So sometimes we interact with a difficult person. They have a wall built up and they're just trying to protect themselves. They're just living in fear. Maybe it's fear that they're going to be rejected. Maybe it's a fear that they're not going to make it throughout the day. Maybe they have something else going on. Maybe they have a child that is sick. We really don't know what's going on in most people's lives, even though we think we do, because we don't have those interactions where it's deep and meaningful and really understanding to what's happening in other people's lives. Next thing I want to talk about is expectations and silent contracts. So what is a silent contract? So I'm going to give you an example. So you and I are really good friends, okay? And we're going to dinner together. And I am so excited. You're coming to dinner, and then dinner happens, and you don't show up. And I'm upset. And I don't know why you didn't show up. This doesn't make any sense. You didn't show up because I didn't give you the invitation. And that's what a silent contract is. We get upset sometimes when we don't even tell the other person what's going on. Give you another example. How many times have you been in a relationship? Let's say it's I go to my parents because that's what is so current for me. So I go to I'll use my parents as an example. You are talking with your parent and you want them, again, we're talking about how you want them to show up. You want them to say to you, you know what, you've done a great job. You've done a great job raising your kids. You've done a great job being the professional that you are. You've done such a great job being the daughter, this child of mine. You've done such a great job in life. That's maybe what you want, but that's not what you get. What you get is, how can you be so stupid? What you get is, I don't know why you would do that. That doesn't make any sense. What you get is, you look really fat in that. Why am I telling you this? Because this is unfortunately what happens in our relationships with other people when we don't really talk about what's going on. So when my mom would say to me, when I would tell her, hey mom, I got this idea. I think I want to do this. And instead of her being supportive and loving and kind and asking me more questions and being more interested, she would say, well, how can you be so stupid? So what does that say? Now, as an adult, I can't take it differently. What does it say to a kid? It says to a kid, Mom always thinks you're stupid. So if you're saying to your child, how can you be so stupid? How can you be this? How can you do that? When they get in trouble, think about that ramifications that's going to happen, what they're going to be stuck with on down the road in their life. Oh, good. Now I'm getting, all of a sudden, sorry, I'm getting all these comments. So thank you for asking comments, or thank you for posting comments. So one of the things that, back to the expectations and silent contracts. So I had a client tell me that this exact thing, that her son had gotten in trouble at school. And she goes right into the principal's office and says in front of everybody, how can you be so stupid? And we talked about it, and I said, what does that say to your son? It says that Mom always thinks he's stupid. So what is it that you really wanted to know? And she said, well, why he did it. I said, okay, great. So you want to know why he did something. So what would have happened if you'd said, hey, what made you decide to do whatever he did to get in trouble? And I believe it was he walked into the girls' restroom. So what made you decide to do that? You could ask why, but here's the thing, what happens when you ask why? People get defensive. People don't want to talk. People don't want to say why. They want to know what made you make that choice. So if you approach it in a different way, you get a different answer. So an expectation is she's expecting her son to be not stupid, even though she's already called him stupid multiple times in his life. I'm expecting my parents to be loving and nurturing and caring and kind and supportive every time I talk to them. And every time I talked to them, I got let down because they were not those things. So when I allowed myself to let go of that expectation, to let go of that silent contract with them, things started to change. So it's really interesting to be able to look at someone and go, okay, I accept you for who you are. And who you are is, you might be unhappy. You might be someone who is a teenager and does silly things. That's what you are. And so I'm going to look at you like that and treat you like that, rather than expecting you to be someone who's mature, someone who doesn't do stupid things. That's a silent contract, an expectation. One of the other things I want to talk on is journaling and why journaling is so important. So for me, I have been journaling, probably close to 20 years now. And probably even before that, because we actually had to do it for homework in school growing up. So journaling for me is therapy. Journaling for me allows me to kind of uncover what I've been hiding from myself. Because I don't know about you, but if we're all on this journey of self-discovery and self-awareness and being awakened to our consciousness and being, instead of on autopilot, we're really just seeing who we really are, that means you're open to the process of uncovering who you really are. So you're open to the process to seeing what's going on. So sometimes you have to ask yourself questions in order to have the conversation kind of come out, meaning the conversation in your body, the conversation in your heart, the conversation in your head. Instead of overthinking, you can write it down, and that's why journaling is so important. So I'm going to take a pause right there, and I'm going to read some of your comments because I really appreciate, and we have so much going on already. And it's 15 minutes in, so thank you so much for being patient and let me just look at the comments really quickly. And hopefully I pronounce people's names right, and if I don't, I apologize. Lotus, hi, how are you? Shamika, hello. Argumentative, yes. People are can be argumentative. Asking deep questions on why you did that and what made them do that. What made you think that was okay? On and on. Very draining. Yes, it can be draining. And it depends on if this person is worth investing in to have that conversation. And we're going to get to that in a minute about if that person is worthy. I will use that word, if they are worth your investment. And Lotus, you also said someone who doesn't listen to you at all, they are always right and put you down. Yes, this is a family member I've been talking about after disagreements. Week of no talking to me, they ask if I figured it out and how I'm going to correct it or fix it. Removing expectations changes the experience. Yes, definitely, Holly. Listen, okay. So I'm going to talk about difficult people as in toxic, emotionally unavailable, narcissists, everybody's favorite word right now, such a huge buzzword. I am not a psychologist. I am not a psychiatrist, although I play one on TV. Just kidding. I am a coach, and so my job is to not diagnose someone with those things. However, my job is to help you understand who you can be when you are surrounded by someone like that. So, toxic people. Toxic people are just that. They're toxic. There's those ones who are constantly complaining. They're the ones who are argumentative. Those are the ones who have to be right. Those are the ones who almost, it sounds like a compliment, but then it's like backhanded, so it's really an insult. But it started out like a compliment. So that is a toxic person. Emotionally unavailable. I want to talk about that quickly. Emotionally unavailable is someone who, like I had explained about my parents, they were unable to give themselves to another person emotionally. In a relationship of a husband and wife, a spousal significant other, it is not, and please don't yell at me, it is not 50-50. It is 100-100. Now, let me explain that. 50-50 means half of me and half of the other person comes together and makes only half of a relationship. A whole person of 100% and a whole person of 100% come together and they create a whole relationship. So in order to have a wholeness in your relationship, you have to be emotionally available. So if you're surrounded by someone who is emotionally unavailable, they have a wall put up. They won't really tell you how they feel. They might tell you what they think, but they won't tell you how they feel. They may not show up physically. They may say, hey, let's get together next week. And then next week comes and goes, and you don't hear from them. But then 2 weeks later, they pop back up, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see. And they talk like nothing ever happened, no time ever passed by, that they didn't say that to you, that they didn't say, hey, a week ago, let's get together. That is sometimes an emotionally unavailable person. Now, the interesting thing is that they don't know that's what they are. And even if you like point it out, depending on the type of person they are, they may not care. Especially if they're the buzzword narcissist, they're not going to care that they're emotionally unavailable. Then they have no desire to fix themselves. They have no desire to heal themselves, to heal that part of themselves. So I'll tell you a little bit about my history in relationships. So I was with a man who was quite a bit older than me, and he was awesome. Actually, when we first met, we were, I guess they call the word love bombing. So he gave me all this attention, and we went out probably 3 to 4 times a week for the first 3 months. And it was amazing. We would go to dinner, just awesome connection, conversation on, believe it or not, psychology. And I was a young 1920s through this time. And we just had a lot in common. Even though he's older, we still had a lot in common. Now, I would say things like, so are we going to, in the future, are we going to do this? Can we plan this? And he would say, well, my life's really busy right now. And he was going to school and he was working. However, he would make unfulfilled promises. He would make, I don't want to say broken promises because they weren't, at the time you didn't think he was going to break them, but they were unfulfilled. So he would say things, he said what you wanted to hear, not what was really going on. So needless to say, I got to the point where I saw him 3 or 4 times a week. We go 3 or 4 months without seeing each other. But when we talked and when we got together, it was really great. So it kind of hooks you back into thinking how amazing this person is. And the truth is, he's just emotionally unavailable. I talked to him, and actually we had gotten back together years later, and he was an alcoholic by this time. And he was the same way, same exact way. He was unwilling to be vulnerable. He was unwilling to actually commit to be in a relationship. I just wanted to be monogamous and exclusive, and he couldn't even give me that. I wasn't even talking marriage, and he couldn't give me monogamous and exclusive. So I was like, okay, this isn't for me. This is not what I want. And that is a boundary, and we're going to talk about boundaries in a minute. And so anyway, that was one relationship. Next relationship was in a complete abusive, very single way person. And he was also an alcoholic, and he was abusive verbally, mentally, physically. And because I grew up in a house that was with other emotionally unavailable people, it was very familiar. What was interesting is I didn't realize how familiar it was until after the fact. Now, again, isn't that hindsight always 20/20, right? Isn't that what they always say? What's so interesting is I learned that that's why it's so easy for women to be in an abusive relationship, because it's very familiar from the house that they grew up in, the family. So if you took the worst negative traits about all of my family, I have 2 older brothers, a mom and dad, and my grandmother that I talked about earlier with the bipolar. You take all of those negative traits and pour them into one person and take it times 1,000,000. That's who this guy was. Now, what's so crazy is that little things that he would say was something that somebody else said. So I just went, okay, well, clearly this is how you're supposed to be treated in a relationship. Now, my brothers were also, they would fight each other. They were quite a bit older than me. So they would fight each other, and then I would be the peacemaker, and I'd try to go in between them and okay, guys, go to your own corners. And then they'd fight me, and then I would end up learning how to fight back. So when this guy comes to me and he pushes me down for the first time, well, guess what? I push him back, because that's what I learned to do. That's how I learned to survive in the house that I grew up in. So of course it was very interesting to be in a relationship with someone who was emotionally unavailable, toxic, all of that. What was really interesting is when I started to learn, and let me give you a book to read. It's called Women Who Love Too Much. So if you are questioning if you are emotionally unavailable or not, or if you're in a relationship with someone who's emotionally unavailable, I highly recommend that book. And if somebody writes a book in the comments, I will write it in there again so we can go back in the replay and see it. And it's called Women Who Love Too Much by Robin Norwood. Highly, highly recommend it. Anyway, emotionally unavailable, if that's who I was in a relationship with, I get out and I start healing. I started to realize that what you are is who you attract. So if that's true, am I being emotionally unavailable? Wait, am I the one being emotionally unavailable too? So if I'm attracting the same thing, then how am I being emotionally unavailable? Oh, right. I had to be vulnerable too. That was a huge eye opener for me. I don't know about any of you, but being vulnerable was probably one of the most difficult lessons I've had to learn. And I had built a wall so high that I say I lived in the tower, in the castle, because I had just put all these bricks up. And then it had a moat around it because I didn't really want to share my feelings. I didn't really want to tell you what I needed. I didn't really want to communicate about deep down in here. I didn't want to tell you my secrets. I didn't want to do any of that. I didn't want to seem like I was weak. I didn't want to seem like I was stupid. I didn't want you to know that I wasn't perfect. I didn't want anybody to know that, you know, I had been abused. There's a lot of shame that goes with that. And when I started to peel away those layers, like we're an onion and we peel away the layers before we are getting ready to chop it up and cook it or serve it or whatever. That's who we are. We are all these layers. And so when I started to peel away these layers and really started to get vulnerable, not only with others, but with myself, I started to be compassionate with myself and kind with myself and stop beating myself up so much, because I was allowing other people to beat me up verbally and physically and emotionally because I was doing it to myself. Yeah. So if you're someone who's verbally and emotionally beating yourself up, it's okay to treat yourself with kindness and compassion. And it's okay to start right now and to forgive yourself. And we'll get to that awesome F word here in a minute. So I'm going to take just a quick break and go down to the comments again. And if there's any questions you have, please put those in there. Lotus, you see fault in everything that you do, and hopefully that's, you don't see the fault, they see the fault. That's the toxic people. Shamika says, that's my father. I call him the leap year father because he comes around every once 4 years. Yeah, definitely. Great book, Women Who Love Too Much. Thank you, Holly, for putting that in there. Yes, 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 that's the book. So toxic people, when you recognize them and you see that that's who they are, you have to understand your responsibility for yourself in that relationship. And that comes to boundaries. Now, we haven't even talked about narcissists. A narcissist is pretty much the same thing, but you have to be able to identify it. So even if, excuse me, let me take a drink really quickly. So when you have that person that you're having the same kind of argumentative conversations, they only come around, you have to protect yourself in a way, and that's what the boundaries are, that allows you to still be you and allows you to communicate in a way or give in a way that's okay for you, not for that other person. How many times, and please put it in the chat, in the comment section, how many times have you allowed someone's, what's the word I want to look for? Their attitude. How many times have you allowed someone's attitude affect your behavior? For instance, have you ever walked in a room and you talk to somebody and that person who's negative, they're complaining, they're talking about everything that's going on in their life, and they just complain, and then all of a sudden you walk away because you've picked up their energy, their vibe, and you walked away, and now you're going and complaining about something to the next person. So you went in happy-go-lucky, and now you're walking away with this behavior that just shifted because of that other person. So that's how you can really identify when someone is as difficult or toxic or emotionally unavailable or a narcissist, whatever label you want to put on it. We'll just call them difficult at this point. And so you really have to be aware of how you want to protect yourself. So what is it that you're willing to give? So if you know this person already, like for instance, let's just pretend, I'm not saying he is, but let's just pretend, Shamika, it's your father. So let's just pretend that you already know that he is not going to give you what you're needing as a daughter. Okay? And that could be love, connection, nurturing, support, encouragement, anything that you're needing from him. He's not going to give that to you. So when you go and talk to him that every 4 years, like you said, you are not going to give anything to him that he is unwilling to give to you. I think as women, and I think most of us are women in this group, I think as women we have a wonderful, warm and loving and nurturing and giving and supportive heart that it just naturally comes out. And we don't even know that we've done it, and we don't even know we're giving it away to someone who will possibly hurt us, or to someone who could possibly take that power and use it against us. So that's why it's really important to look at boundaries, how you can protect yourself, meaning you're only going to talk to him for 5 minutes. You're only going to talk to him for 10 minutes. You're only going to spend an hour with him, whatever that looks like. Put a boundary around time, your energy, your effort. You're only going to talk to him when he asks you a question. You're not going to give anything freely. He has to ask you a question, and those are the questions you're going to answer. It's those types of things that's a boundary. Boundaries are also something that is, it's actually very necessary, especially for women, because of the giving nature that we have. And because we are multitaskers, sometimes we take on too much stuff. Sometimes we are so willing to give that we help everyone else and not help ourselves. Sometimes we're taking care of everyone else and not ourselves. So it's also a good practice to put in boundaries around your self-care and what that looks like. That could mean every day you take an hour, or every week you take a day. Whatever self-care looks like to you, it is important to put boundaries around it. Also your time. Put boundaries around your time. If you, like for instance, for myself, I literally have appointments set all day, every day at some point. So you have a calendar, right? So if you know that between this time and this time is the time that you have alone, literally put it on your calendar. My time, or meeting with self, whatever you have to put on there. So if someone sees it, or if you share a calendar with somebody, they can be like, oh, are you free at this time? Because it's not marked. Oh, no, I have a meeting with myself then, thanks. And that could be going for a walk in a park. That could be listening to your favorite music, meditating, going to yoga, just really connecting, journaling, just really connecting with yourself, whatever that looks like. But you have to put boundaries around self-care. I'll give you an incident that just happened to me recently. I had a friend who made me mad, and I'll just put it that way. And I couldn't figure out why she made me mad at the time. This was 6 weeks later, it all clicked. And what had happened was she had she showed up in our meeting as someone who wasn't prepared. Well, I am prepared. So I didn't want it to look like I'm not prepared. So I went above and beyond what I needed to do to cover her behind, so I looked prepared. If you have done that, that is a very good lesson and then I was mad at her for not showing up. And I went, wait, she showed up how she always shows up. She didn't change herself. I had an expectation with her that she was going to be different, and she wasn't. I was the one who didn't put the boundaries in. I was the one that was going above and beyond. I was the one that was worried that someone else would think that I was not prepared like her, when that's in my head. I have no idea if anybody thought that, because most people don't pool people together. We just think they do. So a lot of times these conversations, going to talk about the conversation part of difficult people, is we're unwilling to get to the truth instead of the story that we tell ourselves about this person or the situation. How many times have you walked away from something and you went, oh, I should have said this, or oh, it's because they're doing this, or oh, it's because this is happening and that's why they acted this way? You have no idea. That is just something that you're making up here that we all do. We all are guilty of this. We all make up the story of what's going on instead of asking questions, instead of getting clarity. So this person was unprepared, and she could have just shown up as unprepared. And I could have stayed over here being prepared, totally fine, and not taking care of her because I was good. That's about putting a boundary, knowing that you're good and that you don't have to take care of somebody else or pick up where they lack in your mind. You don't have to do that. You just be cool where you're at. So that is boundaries. And gosh, you guys are so awesome. Thank you so much for all your comments. Yes, the ripple effect, for sure. Yes, negative energy is contagious. Create a boundary mask. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so let's talk about getting your needs met really quickly. I only have a few more minutes. So a boundary is understanding what your needs are. For the example of my friend, and we went into the meeting together, my need was for me to be prepared. My need was to show up in the way I wanted to show up, which is prepared and fun and delightful and ready to go and just on fire. And she showed up in the way that she showed up. Has nothing to do with me. So how people show up in your relationship has nothing to do with you. That's another boundary, is realizing that you are just trying to get your needs met and they're just trying to get their needs met. And so it's kind of this like dance of trying to figure out how you can get your own needs met. So you really have to figure out what it is that you're needing in that moment. It could be love. You need connection. You need to feel belonging. I think for myself, I think I was overgiving, an overgiver, because I needed to feel loved. I needed to feel belonged. I needed to feel connection to another person because I had emotionally unavailable people around me for so long. And at the core of it all, we all have these core needs: love, connection. We just want to be liked. We just want someone to go, you know what, you're my friend, I like you. Because it all goes back to the being on the playground and you are being picked to be on a team and you're the last person to be picked. We all don't want to be that person. Nobody wants to be that person. So we all want to be liked and loved and felt like we belong, feel like we're connected to one another, feel like we have a community. We might need safety. Our need might be financial stability. We might need, the basics of food, water, shelter, clothing. And if we're all in this world just trying to figure out how to get our needs met, that's the conversation that really needs to happen. Now, I will say there are people, and whatever label you want to put on them, difficult, toxic, narcissist, emotionally unavailable, whatever, their needs, they're so trying to get their needs met that they don't even know if their needs were met because they're just not a happy person in the first place. And so again, it's really important to find out what you're willing to allow and what you're willing to accept for yourself before you even show up. So with that being said, let's talk about intentions for a second. How do you want to show up? Do you want to show up in this meeting? Do you want to show up in this relationship? Do you want to show up with your coworker, your mom, your dad? How do you want to show up? Do you want to show up as loving, compassionate? Do you want to show up as just going to be honest? Do you want to show up as being a bitch? Or do you want to show up as intimidating? If that's how you want to show up, that's how you want to show up. If you want to show up like a leader, then really think about what does a leader look like. Instead of intimidating, maybe it's a leader. You want to be as a leader. For the most part, at the end of the day, how we all want to show up is compassionate and loving and kind. And so in order to show up like that, you have to be willing to practice something. And sometimes we have to be willing to practice those exact things with ourselves first, before we can be that with someone else. And the first thing that we have to practice is patience with ourselves. Because if you have been around personal development for any amount of time, you know this is not a quick fix. This is something that takes a very long time, years and years of practicing. Just like yoga, meditation, exercising, everything else, it's a practice. And one of the key things is the F word, is forgiveness. You have to practice forgiving yourself and others. And you have to forgive yourself first in order to forgive others. And so I'm going to end on this little exercise, if you want to write this down. If you want to take a piece of paper and make a column or a line down the center and 2 columns. And on the left-hand side, you're going to put your name. And on the right-hand side, you're going to put, I am willing to forgive. So all of the negative things that you have ever said to yourself, you're going to put over here and say, I'm stupid. I'm willing to forgive myself. I'm too fat. I'm willing to forgive myself. I'm not good enough. I'm willing to forgive myself. I am not pretty enough. I'm willing to forgive myself. I'm whatever it is. And then I am willing to forgive myself. Then, if there's a person in your life, the next thing you do is go to that person and you put their name on that left-hand column, and I am willing to forgive you on the right-hand column. And you put whatever it is that you need to say to them. I don't like you. I am willing to forgive you. You hurt me. I am willing to forgive you. You did this to me. I am willing to forgive you. And just by doing this exercise, there's so much freedom in letting go of those feelings. And I know our time is coming to an end, so let me please keep this conversation going. You can friend me on Facebook or just on Instagram at I am Shay Sparks, or you can send me a message through this video and or leave a comment for this video. I would love to help in any way, shape, or form that I can, or love to hear your story, and I just really love connecting with people. And one thing I will share, one last thing I want to leave with you is the word ask, A-S-K. And A is to ask questions. Ask questions of yourself and ask questions of others for clarity. S is to seek support. Surround yourself with supportive people, and it's okay to ask for support. And K is to keep it kind. Keep it kind to yourself and keep it kind to others. So again, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for watching the replay if you're watching that. And Leah, thank you for having me. And we will see you next week. Bye.